I assume that most of you in here see this as a nice treat which you enjoy. I assume you consider it as an affordability luxury, and I also assume that you associate it with romance and joy. What I don't think you assume when looking at this picture is child labor. Cadbury is one of the world's leading cocoa producers, and one company among many who supplies its beans from the Ivory Coast. The company was founded in year 1824 by John Cadbury, and from the beginning they offered everything from tea, coffee, to products made out of cocoa. After a few years they decided to focus on the market which generated the highest profit, which was the cocoa industry. At first, Cadbury sourced their beans from the local trading markets in London. But the company got accusations for being involved with child labor, since it got revealed that the local trading markets in London used child labor to produce the cocoa beans. Therefore, a search for a better plantation began. In 1908, the company discovered the Ivory Coast, which is a region in West Africa. The region had both good working conditions and the quality of the beans were very good as well. Since then, Cadbury have been sourcing their cocoa beans from the region. Cadbury is said to have one of the most developed policies and practices against child labor. It is also said that Cadbury ended all their association with child labor back in 1908. But still, 110 years later, they are facing the similar accusations regarding child labor as they did back then. How comes that?
There is a surprising association between chocolate and child labor. Young boys whose ages range from 12 to 16 have been sold into slave labor, and they're forced to work in the cacao farms under inhuman conditions. The Ivory Coast is the leading exporter of the cacao beans to the world market. Therefore, the existence of child labor is relevant to the entire international economic community. Most of the wives come from neighbor country, Mali, where slave traders hanging around the bus stations, looking for children who are alone or begging for food. They trick the kids to go to Ivory Coast with them, and then the traffickers sell the children to farmers in need of cheap labor. One of the victims of child labor, Ali Diabet, was 11 years old when he was tricked by a slave trader. The slave trader told him that he will receive a bicycle and also he will earn $100 monthly so he could help his family. However, life on the cacao farm was nothing like Ali had imagined. He and other workers had to work from 6 in the morning till 6:30 at night. They had to carry bags filled with cacao beans, which were heavier than them, and if they can't carry it, the farmer would beat them until they stood back up and lifted the bag again. At night, he and 18 other slavers were sleeping in one small room, and where they were sleeping in a wooden bed. He was so scared to escape because he saw the others attempt to escape and how they get beaten after that. But later, Ali succeeded to escape from the farm and reported the traffickers. Now, Ali is with his family, but the scares, both physical and psychological, still remain.
The question you probably ask yourself right now is, why is child labor still in 2018 used on the farms? The major part of the cocoa farms in Ivory Coast is a small-scale agricultural farm where child labor is widespread. 87% of children who work within the cocoa production work on these kinds of farms. And the conditions they're forced to work under are critical. In Africa, the usage of child labor on the farms is likely seen as a part of the cultural heritage. It's the way of socializing and education in traditional societies, and the children who work do it to make a reputation for both themselves and for their families. One of the other significant problems is poverty. Many people in Africa work in informal jobs for earning money because of the country's economical problems. Therefore, families who need money allow their children to travel or go with the slave traders to find a job. Cadbury started sourcing its beans from small-scale farms in Ivory Coast for over 100 years ago. It is safe to say that the way we view working conditions now and then have changed during those years. As we said previously, the way the work to produce the beans could be seen as a part of the cultural heritage, and the way we from Western well-developed countries view child labor may not be the same as the people who've grown up under these circumstances. But should cultural heritage be a reason to keep using child labor on the farms? According to an interview, the farmers are finding it frustrating when companies, as well as other countries, try to affect the way they work at the farms. The farmers also believe that the proposal of changes could lead to shortage of cocoa production. Ivory Coast stands for approximately 40% of the world's cocoa production and is the most important income for the country's economy. And therefore, it is significant for the development of the country. This could be one suggested reason that it's hard to quit the way which they always been used to work, using child labor. Furthermore, the demand of products made out of cocoa is increasing all the time, which likely puts a lot of pressure at the farmers and could be considered as a reason for how hard it can be to actually quit.
Before we get our hands on all the different chocolates we really seem to enjoy, there's a whole process that comes before it. Let's take a look at that. The figure here illustrates the structure of the cocoa supply chain. In the first stage, or the early stage of the supply chain, the cocoa beans are sold to traders and grinders by these producers, which are the farmers in this case. Then these local traders and grinders sell the cocoa beans to exporters and international traders, which they then export their beans to either grinders, which they process the cocoa beans and make cocoa butter, cocoa powder, and industrial chocolate. On the other hand, these exporters, they export their cocoa beans to chocolate companies such as Cadbury in this case, and they manufacture chocolate. Then the next stage, these chocolate companies and grinders, they sell their chocolate products to distributors such as the retailers, caterers, and specialized markets. And finally, the products are offered to you guys, the consumers. Although this process does not seem to be as long and as complicated as you would see on other manufacturing products, the early stages of cocoa production, and specifically cocoa production in the Ivory Coast, is much more complicated. The supply chain between the suppliers and the companies are quite long. It is normally driven by an intermediator, which plays an important role regarding how easy it could be to lose track of where these beans are being produced and under which circumstances. This is a challenge for companies like Cadbury, since it's difficult to sort out which beans were sustainably produced and assure that there was no involvement of child labor. It's like the expression, picking a needle from a haystack.
Many steps have been taken to illuminate the problem regarding child labor on the Ivory Coast. One of them is the Minimum Age Convention, which the International Labour Organization created in 1973 to regulate the ages of children working at the farms. According to this convention, the minimum age for employment is 12 years old. It also says that if the work would jeopardize the employee's health or safety, the person may not be under 18 years old. It's safe to say that these conventions have not worked as well as expected. Ally was only 11 years old when being sold as a slave to work at a farm. And the circumstances he worked under led to both physical and psychological injuries.
In 2008, Cadbury initiated the Cadbury Cocoa Partnership. Their main objective is to improve the livelihoods of cocoa farmers and to ensure that cocoa beans are sustainably produced. One of the strategies they have used in order to accomplish this goal is by assigning local facilitators that are trained and assigned to facilitate production of cocoa beans in the local farms. In order to reassure that these local facilitators are doing their job, they're under the control of the Cocoa Board. Cocoa Board is an institution that regulates the production of cocoa beans throughout the supply chain. Fair Trade is another example of such organization. In 2009, Fair Trade partnered with Cadbury. As Fair Trade works directly with farmers and workers, it is easier to assure the sustainability of the product. Same as Cocoa Life, they work constantly to improve the lives of cocoa farmers. All products that include the Fair Trade mark on the packaging implies that 100% of all eligible ingredients fulfill the international Fair Trade standards. These standards require that all products, in case of Cadbury, both the cocoa and sugar, are sustainably produced. This requires that there was no involvement of child labor whatsoever, and a mutual agreement were made between buyers and farmers that benefits both. Due to the partnership of Cadbury with these organizations, there has been a great increase in sustainably produced products by Cadbury. However, it is still difficult to assure that there is no involvement of child labor whatsoever, as cocoa beans are intermingled before shipment and as they originate from millions of farms across the Ivory Coast. In that account, what can Cadbury do in order to help solve the problems they are facing? By reassuring that their cocoa beans are sustainably produced and there is no involvement of child labor whatsoever. Cocoa Life and Fair Trade are one of the many organizations that work constantly towards sustainably produced cocoa beans. If Cadbury was to create more of this partnership and source all of its cocoa beans from these organizations, it can reassure that child labor is not involved in its supply chain.
To improve the working conditions on the farms in the future, another solution could be an improved cooperation between the companies and the government of the Ivory Coast. As they both are dependent upon each other, Cadbury is dependent on the production of the cocoa beans, whereas the France relies on the trading of cocoa beans. Therefore, a cooperation between the companies with the government of the Ivory Coast should be considered to affect the farms. For example, education for the children could be developed in a cooperation such as like this. And it will likely affect the cultural heritage. Furthermore, a cooperation like this could also help creating a better system for the regulation of the beans and the supply chain. However, to make sure that all the suggested solutions will work in the long run, the convention mentioned by the International Labour Organization is significant for the work against child labor as well.
I assume that all of you in here got an overview of this chocolate bar right now, and I'm glad you did. As consumers, you can also have an impact on the ongoing work against child labor. This by being aware of where the cocoa products comes from and under which circumstances they are produced. When buying products made out of cocoa beans, seek for the Fair Trade mark or the Cocoa Life logo. This implies that the products are sustainable produced and not on a farm like the one Ally worked on.